Hello everyone, it's Karen. Welcome back to part 2 of the Beatles' career review. We're doing this as a kind of like, just to keep the series going, and with the 100 subscribers special in a sense. So yeah, where were we? 1967, where we stopped off at Magical Mystery Tour. They released the single Hello Goodbye in the November of 1967. It was another hit with I'm the Walrus on the flip side. Brian Epstein had been found dead had died the previous August. It was an accidental drugs overdose, which shocked and saddened everyone in the Beatles and their association, their circle, from George Martin to people like George Martin were shocked at that. And then they did the Magical Mystery Tour. During this period, they had their new company, Apple. But before that, they released their final single on the Parlophone label, which was Lady Madonna, in the March of 1968. And it was backed with the Inner Light. And so then in 1968, they went to India. They wrote a lot of songs, and then when they came home, they went to George Harrison's house in Esher, and they did a lot of demos. And then they went into the studio and recorded their next album, which was titled Just the Beatles. Released in November of 1968, but it's also known as the White Album, and you can actually see on the vinyl versions, which like I have the Beatles names embossed and printed. The White Album was a different album from the Beatles' catalogue. It was their first and only double album, studio album, and this is actually 2 CDs on the White Album. They've continued with that. Bit of experimental. They've gone for like a hard rock style, and they're doing a lot of like weird experimental stuff as well, continuing with that. Back in the USSR is a great one, Dear Prudence, Oobla Dee Oobla Da, which later a hit for the Marmalade. The continuing story of Bungalow Bill, which Ringo sings. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, I'm So Tired, Blackbird, nice acoustic one from Paul. Rocky Raccoon, it's kind of a country style song. Don't Pass Me By, which was Ringo's first song he wrote, and the first writing credit he gets in this album as well. Why Don't We Do It in the Road, short but kind of cool. I Will is a nice acoustic one from Paul. Julia. You've got Birthday, a great rocker. Mother Nature's Son. Helter Skelter is a great hard rocker. Long, Long, Long. Revolution 1. Honey Pie. And Good Night's a nice closer from Ringo. It's a really great album, but however, the only 2 songs I don't really like are the experimental ones, Wild Honey Pie and Revolution 9. They don't really... I know some fans might like Revolution 9, but it doesn't really do much for me, unfortunately. Yeah, neither does Wild Honey Pie, which I'm kind of glad it's quite short, to be honest. Yeah, great album. It's considered a favourite amongst fans, and yeah, it is a great one. But during this period, tension within the group started to emerge. They began to argue, squabble and whatnot, and they were kind of recording separately as well at this point, doing separate bits. Ringo at one point during the sessions walked out for 2 weeks before being persuaded to return. Jeff Emerick, the engineer, at one point stood down, and he was replaced with Ken Scott, and Ken Scott. Yeah, it was all kind of a bit tense, but they managed to get this record done, and then during that they released their first Apple single, which was Hey Jude, which was a song that Paul McCartney had written for Julian Lennon, the son of John, and John's wife Cynthia, after they got divorced. And it's a great one. Lasted for 7 minutes, so the Beatles were kind of doing different things by this point in 1968. They then also went and did a film for their Yellow Submarine, which was a cartoon film, and they released a soundtrack in the January of 1969. This is probably lowest in the Beatles catalog because it's not an actual album. You have 2 previously released songs in here, which are Yellow Submarine and All You Need Is Love, which are both in the film. But you have 4 songs that were never released, which were Only a Northern Song, All Together Now, which is a great one, Hey Bulldog, and It's All Too Much. They're all good, bar for It's All Too Much. I've just never liked that one. And you get the film score. The other half is film score orchestrated by George Martin, and it's quite good. It's not bad. It's actually really, really quite good. It's just not a proper Beatles album, like I say. But it's not bad, it's good, it's not a proper album in the catalogue. So yeah, I don't have the film on DVD yet, but I did watch it in music class years ago, and it was a bit odd, kind of cartoony, psychedelic kind of thing and whatnot. Yeah, it's not bad, not a bad film. Oh, sorry, soundtrack album. During that period, I'm not sure whether to do these two first, but then they were recording, Paul McCartney came up with a new idea that they were going to write a new album, have it rehearsed, and then they would do a big some kind of concert for the end of this film. They were going to do a television special. But that quickly became apparent that wasn't a good idea because there was a bit arguing at Twickenham Studio, and George eventually walked out during the sessions. That only lasted for a week before he was coaxed back in, and they then recorded at Apple Studios in Savile Row, which was a bit much nicer and it went well. Which I have to get back Blu-ray from that downstairs. Again, I forgot to bring it up, but I do have the Blu-ray of Get Back, which is a great watch they did last year or the year before. Then they did a big rooftop building concert, the rooftop on their Apple building in Savile Row, and it was filmed, and folk were just like, "Oh wow, this is amazing." And then because of a noise complaint, the police came and tried to stop the show and whatnot. So yeah, and Paul McCartney said when he was and Ringo said, "I wish they came off the drums and pulled me off," and like that. But then they just went, "Oh, we're going to turn that song down." But yeah. So yeah, it was apparent that all was not well with the Beatles recording, and financially all was not going well. They were low in finances. Their business, Apple, was struggling with their finances, and it was clear that all was not going well. John had met this American businessman, a guy named Alan Klein. Now, Alan Klein had done quite well because he had managed and advised the Rolling Stones. I think Donovan as well. But I know he'd managed and advised the Rolling Stones. So John basically liked what Alan was doing and basically said, "Oh, I'll get Alan to manage us." George and Ringo went along with it. Paul was dead against it. And Paul wanted his wife's brother or his wife's dad to do their business. But the other three basically voted against it, and Alan Klein was given management against Paul's wishes. And as for the Let It Be / Get Back film and project, they basically had loads of hours of film and tape that they'd done, but basically no one could face the task of sitting down and going through these reels and reels of tape and those hours and hours of film that they'd done. So basically it just sat on the shelf. And George Martin kind of felt it was the end of the Beatles and he would never get to work with them again. But he got a surprise phone call from Paul McCartney one day saying, "Oh, we're going to go into the studio and make another album. How would you feel about producing it?" And George says, "Well, if you'll let me, I will." But Paul said, "Yeah, we want to do it like we used to." And so they then recorded in February and then throughout the summer of 1969, and the album result was Abbey Road, released in the September of 1969. Abbey Road is a great, great album. It's probably my top favourite Beatles albums. It's a really great album. They're not really doing much experimental stuff now. They're kind of going back to their sound in a way and the way they used to. Again, the cover, one that you've seen many times and recreated as well, but it's a great cover. You got Come Together, Something, Oh Darling, Octopus's Garden, Here Comes the Sun. You can get a big medley as well, which is great, with things like Me, Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam, She Came Into the Bathroom Window, and another medley of like Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight in the end in this album. And the album finishes with a nice little acoustic ditty of Her Majesty, which is a short but nice song. This would be like the last album that the Beatles would record as a group together. So yeah, even though probably no one really knew it at the time, but yeah, it was a great way to end their recording career with this album, Abbey Road, 1969, September. But before the release of that album, John had announced privately to the other three he wanted out, he was done, and he was going to go. And the others were quite taken aback and surprised, but they all agreed, look, let's not say anything because we don't want it to affect sales of Abbey Road. But it didn't make much difference because Abbey Road was another big successful album. But they never told anyone about John's departure. And then 1970, the Beatles, the other three, went back into the studio and they did some other tracks. They did a song called I Me Mine, which George had done during the Get Back, Let It Be sessions, but never finished it. And they finished off the track Let It Be, which was released as a single in the March of 1970. by that point, the Beatles were kind of beginning to enjoy their private lives and kind of spend more time with their families. John had his new girlfriend and now wife Yoko Ono. George was sort of spending time with Patty and becoming interested in Indian kind of cultures and spiritualism. Paul was spending time with Linda and recording a solo album, and Ringo had a family, and Ringo had his sons, I think a couple of sons. At this point, they were all kind of enjoying their own private lives and had their own families, and they were now in their 30s and they were getting older and had beards and long hair. But there was still the question of what was going to happen with the Let It Be and Get Back project. Well, John had recorded a solo single called Instant Karma, and he had George Harrison come along and get involved in that track. And the guy who was producing that session was a guy called Phil Spector. And Phil Spector was a well-renowned American producer. He'd produced the Ronettes, he'd done a lot of records from the 60s, which a lot of people loved. And so he asked, John and George asked Phil if he would come down and do some work on the Let It Be and Get Back project. And so Phil Spector in the March and April of 1970 worked on hundreds of hours, sat through the hundreds of hours of tape that had been done. He added orchestras, he edited, and can basically put the album together. And the album was sort of done by Glyn Johns, and Phil Spector, I think, did a great job in them. He did work on the songs. He slowed some of the songs down, in particular Across the Universe, which had been on a kind of charity album a year earlier. And he took some stuff from the Rooftop concert they'd done. He extended I Me Mine. He added orchestra to the Long and Winding Road, and he edited Get Back, and he added some of the studio dialogue from the sessions at intros of the album. And the then album result was this, Let It Be, which was released in the May of 1970. By the time the album was released, however, what had happened was Paul McCartney had been making a solo album, and he was going to release it, I think, at the same time as Let It Be. But the other three Beatles wanted Paul to delay the album and so that Let It Be can have its impact. And then they said they sent Ringo round to Paul to basically explain it to him, which didn't go very well, and they argued about it, and then eventually the album came out in April of 1970. But Paul McCartney was very, very unhappy with Phil Spector's involvement with Let It Be, especially the song The Long and Winding Road, which is a great way. I like Phil Spector's version of it a bit more. But before that, Paul had issued a statement that that the Beatles had quit, and he'd quit and the Beatles were over. So Paul got it in the neck for breaking up the Beatles, when in actual fact it was John that ended the Beatles. But yeah, anyway, back to Let It Be. A great album. You got Two of Us, Across the Universe, Capone, I Me Mine, Let It Be, I've Got a Feeling, The Long and Winding Road, and Get Back. It's a great album. It's a good album to go out with, I think. One After 909 was a song that they had previously done written in 1960 and done on the For Me to You sessions, which wasn't released, so it got released here. So yeah, really great album. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it's a really, really good album, I think. And when it came out, it originally came out in a big box set, and then it came out as a standalone album in a few months later. So yeah, really good album, Let It Be, 1970. So April 10th, 1970, it was all over. The Beatles had split. They were no more. They were now pursuing independent solo projects, which we'll touch upon on a later video, and on future videos I'll do a careers view on all their solo projects on future videos. So yeah, it was a sad end to what had been a great career. But then in the 1970s we got a lot of compilations that kind of reflect nostalgia on them, and these two came out in April 1973 from Apple, which are these two. 1962 to 1966, also known as the Red Album, and 1967 to 1970, also known as the Blue Album. These are the original CD issues. I do have the 2010 remasters from like the digipacks. So yeah, these were kind of put out in response to a box set that had been called Alpha Omega, which a US company had done in the 1970s, and they put them out with like solo tracks and regular Beatles tracks in this box set. But Apple found out about this and they sued the company, and then that set was pulled off the market, and then Apple and Alan Klein decided, well, we'll put these two together, and they did. If you're going to start your Beatles collection, vinyl or CD, I have these both on vinyl and CD, this would be a good one to start with. You've got loads of great tracks from like, this focuses the Please Please Me and the Revolver era, and this is the Sgt. Pepper through to Let It Be era. So yeah, you get a wide mix of everything on these two albums. So yeah, what I like about the fact is for like the album covers, this was the front, this would be the back of the red, this was front, and this was the back of blue. So these two pictures were kind of, this is like an outtake from the Please Please Me sessions, and this was like the Get Back project that they intended, that they never used. But so yeah, it's a really, really great set. If you're going to start your Beatles collection, vinyl or CD, this is the two to start with. This is the two to get, because this focuses on all their careers, and you get everything on here. So yeah, these are great ones to get, and yeah, brilliant albums, both vinyl or CD, whatever. And they're very popular amongst the vinyl community, I think. Then 1976, we got another compilation, the Beatles Rock and Roll Music, and this is released in the June of '76. This was put together because the Beatles' contract with EMI had expired, and they then re-released all their singles in a box set. But they didn't really know what to release, and then there was a suggestion of one of the Capitol executives to put out a collection of rock and roll music songs. This was put together by George Martin. Whether this should be one to get, if you're a Beatles collection, you want to have everything, yeah, get it, but is it seen as another cash cow? Well, at the time, again, this was a good one to get because it was the first time a lot of the tracks were re-released and available on the albums, because a lot of the albums I think were at this point were getting difficult to get hold of, so it was good to get a representation of the Beatles rock and roll songs. This is a great compilation as well. It's got a great cover design as well. Some people don't like it, but I like it. I think it's a good cover, even though it's kind of cartoon, and I like the kind of rock and roll music sort of neon lettering at the top, which I think looks really cool. So yeah, whether this should have been out or not, or whether, if you are a Beatles fan and you like to have everything, again, but you know, yeah, at the time it was seen as a great release, but maybe now it's been seen as a cash in, I don't know. But yeah, great compilation album nonetheless. So yeah, if you can get this one, yeah, definitely. And then in 1976, this also came out, the Beatles tapes from the David Wigg interviews. This is a really great double CD. Got this on vinyl as well. This is one I played quite a lot. I really liked hearing the interviews, like from what was going on at the time. These interviews taken from like 1968 into 1973, right kind of at the time the Beatles were kind of imploding and breaking up. You get John, each Beatle has their own side, so John and Yoko get one side, Paul McCartney gets the other, George and Ringo get their own sides as well. So yeah, really interesting, yeah. So it's one that I listen to quite a lot on vinyl, and it's a really, really great interview album, and you even get incidental music of some of their songs as well. So yeah, great one to listen to, great one, the Beatles tapes. If you can get this one, I recommend you get this one, because it's a good one. Then in 1977, a couple of live albums came out, and the first one was this, the Beatles live at the Star Club in Hamburg, Germany, 1962. This is like their recordings taken from like their December 1962 engagement New Year's Eve shows in like 1962, December 62, their last Hamburg shows till 66, and it was one of their first shows to feature Ringo on the drums. The quality now, this is very well documented. Now this was recorded by a guy from one of the Liverpool groups on a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and the quality's not brilliant. It's a bit hard to hear, but it's listenable. It's they're good performances wise. Very quality wise, maybe not, but still good to listen to and still good to own in the collection. I don't think it's available on CD, so the vinyl's probably the best way of getting it, and this is the vinyl version that I have of it. So yeah, great one to own though, Beatles Live at Star Club in Hamburg. And that encouraged Capitol to bring out their own album, their own official album. I think the Beatles had tried to stop the Star Club tapes from coming out, but it went through. But then this album came out, the Beatles Live at the Hollywood Bowl, in May of 1977. This is again a great live album. This is the 2016 edition. The original cover looked like this. This is a great cover. I would prefer it if they went with this one, but still good to see them change things a bit. But Live at the Hollywood Bowl was taken from two shows they did in August of 1964 and August 1965 that Capitol had recorded with the intention of releasing them as a live album. But obviously with the quality not being what it was, they decided not to release the Live at the Hollywood Bowl tapes. So they sat on the shelf until 1977 when George Martin and Jeff Emmerich, the engineer, put together these tapes and did an album of it. And it never came out in CD officially until the 8 Days a Week, a Touring Years film, which is a brilliant film. I would recommend you watch it if you haven't seen it. So yeah, it's a great album, live album. And this remix is really good because they've kind of detoned some of the screaming a bit, which is nice. Good to hear that they did that. So yeah, a great one, live at the Hollywood Bowl. Then in November of '77, this album came out, Love Songs. This was kind of like an attempt, like a follow-up of Live at the Hollywood Bowl and Rock and Roll Music, which have been very successful. These are songs there. Again, if you want to get this album, yeah, I would say do. If you're a Beatles collector and you like to have everything, it's a good one to get. But maybe I don't know if nowadays it'd be seen as another cash-in, but there's nonetheless some great tracks on here and some great song choices on here as well. And it's got a nice sort of cover design. So yeah, this is a great one. The Beatles Love Song. So yeah, I don't have much to say about the compilation albums, but they're all still quite good. This has a lot of great ones on here, a lot of great love songs from like the time era. So yeah, if you like Beatles collecting, you want to have the compilation albums again, please do. You know, go ahead with it. And then in 1980, 1978, they released all the studio albums in a big blue box and released a bonus compilation called Rarities, which had a lot of the B-sides, songs and whatnot. So it was the first time you got them on vinyl. Forgot to bring that up. I wasn't sure about including it, but I didn't include it there. Maybe I should have done. Then in 1980, they released the Beatles box, which is an 8 LP box set in Liverpool, from the Liverpool Big Crate box, which I've done a video on. If you want to see me talk about that box set in more detail, go back to the channel. I think it's one of the early videos I made. And obviously on December 8th, 1980, we lost John from when he was shot in New York, which was a great loss. And that kind of got people interested in the Beatles up again. Demand for Beatles albums went up again. And then in 1982, it was 20 years since the Beatles released Love Me Do. And so EMI did something quite special for that. They released they re-released Love Me Do as a single in October of 1982. And then this album came out for the 20 years. Beatles 20 Greatest Hits. Again, is it seen as another cash-in? I don't know, but it was kind of a special thing at the time. But it doesn't really have anything from like Let It Be. It has like the songs there. So yeah, it's not a bad album, but it's a good album. And if you wanted any Beatles album but didn't really want any big double albums again, maybe get this one. But it's maybe not one I would say a go-to. A go-to would be the red or the blue albums on vinyl or CD. This is probably not one to go to, but if you want to get it, like I say, if you want to get it if you're a Beatles collector, definitely get it. But yeah, it's good to have, and it was good that they did something for the 20th anniversary. And it's a good compilation album. It's one I've played quite a bit, actually, I will admit. And then in 1987, the Beatles catalogue started to come out on CD for the first time, and and then with this album they released this album, The Past Masters, Volumes 1 and 2. This is the 2009 edition with both volumes combined, but you got the original single version of Love Me Do with Ringo on drums, and you got B-side songs, and you got other songs, EP songs as well. So the Long Tall Sally EP that was in June 1964. The German versions of I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You. The single versions of Get Back and Let It Be. So yeah, this is kind of the stereo mixes of those ones, the 2009 CD. But the 1988 had the first few tracks in mono, some tracks in mono and some in stereo. So this is all stereo apart from a few of the tracks. So yeah, good to get this. This is a good one, Past Masters. If you want to get this one, I'd recommend you get this one because it's got like all the kind of album tracks and rarities as well. Again, I don't yet have this on vinyl. I'm still on the lookout for it in vinyls, but I'll definitely get it on vinyl. And then in the 1990s, Paul was touring again. Paul McCartney was touring, and there wasn't really much Beatles release. And then in 1990, and Ringo started to tour again as well by this point. And then in 1994, we got this announcement, which many were not anticipating or expecting, but it's a great release nonetheless. The Beatles live at the BBC, which was released in November of 1994. This is one I've got good memories for because this is one I used to listen to quite a lot. I love the performances on here. It's kind of the Beatles in a studio, but there's some tracks recorded in front of an audience. These are taken from like radio sessions recorded in 1963 to 1965, and it's great to hear the Beatles kind of give some bit of banter with some of the presenters of the shows at the time. So yeah, it's great to have this one, and a lot of the tracks on here that the Beatles never did on any studio albums, you can pause it and have a look at the track listing as you can see it all here. So yeah, it's great to have this one. It's a great double CD live at the BBC. It's what I recommend in terms of Beatles live material. The quality right will vary from being really good to being fair. because a lot of these I think were taken from off-air tapes, because the BBC didn't keep a lot of their radio tapes at the time, but a lot of these came from like transcription discs that were pressed out to overseas, and a lot of them these were like off-air tapes. So yeah, they use a wide variety of sources for this project, but great album nonetheless. And then it was released in 2013 in a black and white cover with some bonus material, bonus content as well, and they've kind of remastered some of the tracks in here. So maybe get the remastered version if you want to get live at the BBC, but I would definitely recommend you check out this album because it's a great live album, one of my favourite Beatles releases. And then in 1995, the Beatles were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then during that period they got together with Jeff Lynne and they began to remaster and sort of add music to a couple of John Lennon demos that had never before been released. The song was called Free as a Bird, which became a hit, and it was released in this album, Anthology 1, in the November of 1995. This has unreleased recordings that the Beatles did from, I think it was the soundtrack to a TV documentary they did, which I've got in DVD, which is a great documentary you should check out. You've got Free as a Bird, of course, and you've got the Quarrymen acetate recordings of That'll Be the Day and In Spite of All the Danger, which is one of the earliest Beatles compositions that they did. And you've also got 1960s home recordings in Liverpool. You've got the Decca Audition, the Hamburg Tony Sheridan stuff. There's like stuff from the Royal Variety performance in November 1963, TV appearances, studio outtakes. Yeah, you get a wide mix of everything on here. And it's really great, this one. This is one I would recommend if you want some like unreleased and rare Beatles stuff. This would be a great one to get hold of. And again, a great cover design as well. And each cover of these kind of go with the time frame of the albums. So yeah, I have this on vinyl and CD. Great one to have. Then in 1996, we got another Beatles demo, John Lennon demo, to be remastered and worked on, which was a song called Real Love. And that was released in 1996, and it came on Anthology 2 in the March of 1966. This has stuff from like the Help, Rubber Soul outtakes, live stuff, and even the Sgt. Pepper Magical Mystery Tour stuff. The Anthology 1's kind of like from 1958 till 1964, so like the early days up to Beatles for Sale. This is great. You've got the John Lennon demo, Strawberry Fields Forever, and you've got the live Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby from Shea Stadium. You've got some unreleased songs in here, which are That Means a Lot, If You've Got Trouble, and 12 Bar Original, and yeah, that's all the other stuff in here. And the unreleased stuff in Anthology 1 is Leave My Kitten Alone and You Know What to Do, which are both quite good to have, and the versions of One After 909 from Me To You sessions, which one didn't do well because they didn't really do that many complete takes of it. They only did like one complete take, and then they would make an edit of other takes for like to complete a song. So yeah, you get both is interesting here, and you get the Pete Best drumming version of Love Me Do on here, which was from the EMI audition, which is great to have. And so yeah, Anthology 2 is another really good one. I do not have this on vinyl as of yet, but I'm still on the lookout for it on vinyl. It's quite difficult to get hold of, but I'll definitely try and get it. Then 1996, we've got the last of the three, Anthology 3. Do you think we should do an Anthology 4? Maybe, maybe not, who knows. But this is kind of like white albums. You got like George Harrison, the extra demos, some of the Let It Be and Get Back stuff, and some of the Abbey Road stuff. So yeah, this is kind of the last part of the anthology. So yeah, it's great to have this one. You've got unreleased George Harrison song called Not Guilty, and What's the New Mary Jane, and you've got Come and Get It, which is a song that Paul had written for Badfinger. Step Inside Love, which was a song that Paul gave to Cilla Black, and she used that as the theme for her show in the 60s. So yeah, good to have that one. Really great one, Anthology 3. And it was good to see that we were getting loads of unreleased material, and it would be many years when we got unreleased outtakes like the Abbey Road White Album and Revolver Deluxe Editions and Let It Be Deluxe Editions, all of which I've got. Then in 1999, when the El Submarine film was being made available on video and DVD for the first time, this came out, the El Submarine Songtrack. This is all the songs from the film, and this is probably a good way of getting the El Submarine film because it's got all the songs from the film. This is probably how it should have been, I don't know, but yeah, this is definitely preferable to the actual album. And I've got this on vinyl as well. So yeah, this is kind of remixed. It was kind of remixed for this one, and so yeah, I wasn't sure about including it, but I thought I'd include it anyway. But yeah, if you can get this one, again, a really good one, I'd recommend you get hold of that one. Then we're now approaching the kind of new millennium into 2000. In November of 2000, this CD came out, The Beatles 1. if you want to start your Beatles collection on CD, this is a good one to start with. This has all their #1 songs, all the #1 singles. But why Please Please Me on here? Well, because Please Please Me wasn't #1 in some sort of places, but so yeah, that's probably not on here. But yeah, it's a great CD nonetheless, and this was the first Beatles item I got on CD. It was my introduction to the Beatles was this CD in a way. So yeah, it's great that this is a great one to get. The Beatles 1, great album. So after the release of 1, in between the release of 1 and in between the next release, George Harrison passed away from lung cancer at the age of 58 in November of 2001, leaving Paul and Ringo as the surviving Beatles, which was a great loss in the music world of George. And then in November of 2003, we got this album, The Beatles' Let It Be Naked. This is stripped down versions of the Let It Be stuff before Phil Spector got his hands on the recordings. Yeah, good to have. And I think Paul McCartney said to be prefers this version to the regular Let It Be album that we end up getting. But I personally like both the Naked and the Let It Be versions. And you also get a bonus disc of the Fly on the Wall, which is like, you get like to hear the Beatles in work at rehearsal in the studio in January of 1969. So great one to have there. Let It Be Naked from 2003. Again, I do not have this on vinyl. I'm still on the lookout for it on vinyl. As with these two, they're both quite difficult to get hold of on vinyl, but if I can find them for a good price somewhere, yeah, I'll definitely pick them up. Where am I talking? And then in 2006, in November, the Beatles' music was part of the Cirque du Soleil show, and then they released this album and remixed all the songs the Beatles love in 2006. They kind of mixed up some songs and mashed up some songs and whatnot, and which is quite interesting to see. This was kind of done by George Martin, which was the last thing he did, and George's son Giles, who's now been at hand with all the Beatles remixes and whatnot. So yeah, I haven't heard the album in full, but it's an interesting concept, I think. It's got a nice cover. I like the cover. So yeah, not a bad project, I think. It's one that I think Beatles fans will own for their collection. Again, I don't have this on vinyl. I'm still going to look out for it on vinyl, but I'll definitely find it on vinyl if or when I can. Then in 2009, with the release of the Beatles Rock Band, it was announced that their catalogue was getting remastered and re-released onto CD, and both in mono and in stereo. And we've got these two box sets, the Beatles in mono and the Beatles, just the Beatles, and these are both great box sets. If you can get them for a good price, definitely pick them up, because they're worth picking up. This has all the stereo albums, this has all their albums, and the past masters, and the mini documentary DVD, which is like a mini documentary to discuss their albums. And this mono set has all the mono albums and even a CD called Mono Masters, which I'll just take out from here. The box sets fall apart in this one, unfortunately, but yeah. The Mono Masters has some more material than the Past Masters does, but still both great box sets if you can get them. And they both came out on the 9th of the 9th, 2009, so September 9th, 2009. Kind of reference to Revolution number 9 a bit. And then there wasn't really much. There was the Tomorrow Never Knows iTunes compilation album, which I don't have because I don't have a physical copy of it. And then we got another release in November of 2013, On Air, live at the BBC Volume 2. This is a great one. I like this in Volume 1 equal. This has more material from 1963, and it has a lot more stuff that the Beatles never recorded for an EMI studio album. And again, this was the first Beatles album release I got on release. It's a great thing, great album. I love it. It's one of my favourites. Again, great to hear some of the banter between some of the presenters and the Beatles, and we even get a couple of interview tracks from each member, on a bonus track on each disc. John and George and Paul and Ringo. The John and George interviews from like November 65 for Pop Profile, and the Paul and Ringo tracks are from Pop Profile in May of 1966. So yeah, great to hear those ones. Again, get both the BBC volumes. I recommend them both. They're both great. They're both great sounding albums. They're both great albums. Yeah, great ones to own. Beatles Live at the BBC Volume 2. Then later in 2013, we got this iTunes compilation. This is a pirate copy of it, I must say. Beatles bootleg recordings 1963. I made the CD so that I could have it on a CD as well as listen to it on the computer as well. This has 1963 studio outtakes from the Please Please Me album, from Me To You sessions, the couple from with the Beatles, and more BBC recordings. So some of the stuff that never made the first 2 volumes have made it onto here now. They did this because I think it was a copyright thing in 2013 to keep the copyright extension. So they did that, and it's a good release, really. You could probably get it on YouTube, or I'm not sure. But if you can get it on iTunes, I think it should still be available. You can get hold of it. I would recommend you get it. And then the last thing I'm going to show is this box set, the US albums. This has all their US albums with the mono and stereo mixes, but they use the 2009 masters for these, but still good nonetheless. I hope to do a video on these. I hope to do a video on these albums and talk about them a bit more. But like I said, I was going to do all the UK albums. This has this on CD for the first time. Beatles Story. So yeah, it's good to have these for like the collection purposes. Some of these have altered track listings from like the US and UK albums at the time, so it's a good time for collectors. If you can get this, yeah, try and get it if you can. Might not be available, but should still be available. So in recent times we've had the Beatles remixes from like the albums, and there's rumoured to be some compilation album coming out at the end of the year, and there's all sorts of rumours of what's going to be next, but we'll need to wait and see what happens. That's the Beatles. They did a lot in such a short period of time, you know, from Love Me Do to 1962 to Let It Be in 1970. That's 13 studio albums in 8 years. It's an amazing achievement, and they went on to influence a whole bunch of people, like what Elvis did. The Beatles influenced many that would follow in the years that came. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's quite a long one, and I do talk on too much. If you got through both these parts, I do hope you got through them all. Like, comment, subscribe, and I hope to do more of these because the Simon & Garfunkel went really well, and I hope we'll get to do more of these in the future and as the channel goes on. So thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.